people should realize mental health is physical. That's the paradox. Mental health is physical. Your brain is a physical organ. And with age, there's wear and tear, just like your knees start to go if you play, like me, too much basketball in your life, right? Your brain also inflammation also starts to take out nerve cells and synapses in your brain. So you have to do two things: reduce the attack of the inflammation with SHIELD, and also with SHIELD, the yellow part, learn new things and build up your resilience by making more synapses. So you have more to lose before you lose it.
Hi, I am Dr. Carrie Mizuto, board certified internal medicine physician, functional medicine expert, and VP of clinical operations here at Lifeforce. I am thrilled today to be joined by Dr. Rudolph Tanzi. He is an advisor to Lifeforce and a world-renowned researcher in the world of Alzheimer's research. If you don't know who he is, let me give a brief intro here. Dr. Rudolph Tanzi serves as professor of neurology at Harvard Medical School and is the vice chair of neurology, director of the Genetics and Aging Research Unit, and co-director of the McCance Center for Brain Health at Massachusetts General Hospital. He served on the team that was the first to find a disease gene using human genetic markers, helping to launch the field we know today as neurogenetics. Dr. Tanzi has published over 500 research papers and has received the highest awards in his field. I won't name them all here. We'll be here for a while, as well as being named to Time Magazine's list of 100 most influential people in the world. Dr. Tanzi is one of the world's leading researchers in Alzheimer's disease, and we are honored to have him here to speak with us today. Dr. Tanzi, welcome.
Thanks. Thanks for the nice introduction.
There was much more to say, but I know that we want to dive in because you have so many wonderful pearls of wisdom to share with people around the field of brain health. So I'd love to just dive right in and know a little bit more about what drew you to this field that you're spending so much time in today.
You know, originally my interest was in genetics. And so when I was, in college, I was interested in just learning about what was on a new field or emerging field of, genetic engineering. We don't call it that much anymore, but the idea of basically, using genes to come up with ways to understand disease and come up with new medications. There were so many diseases, especially neurological diseases, where we don't know what causes them. We don't know the proteins involved. And so I was able to be a key member of a team that first found a gene for a disease where we didn't know, Huntington's disease. And then I kept applying genetics to studies of Down syndrome. And then, as you may know, Down syndrome subjects go on to get Alzheimer's pathology by middle age. And that suggested to me there might be an Alzheimer's gene. It was unknown at that time. And that it would be on the same chromosome that's involved with Down syndrome, chromosome 21. And that bet turned out to be right. So for my doctoral thesis at Harvard Medical School, I discovered the first Alzheimer's gene, which we call the amyloid precursor protein, or APP. And it makes the plaque that accumulates in the brain. And then I never turned back. So I've been, discovering genes for Alzheimer's and building model systems like mini human brain organoid models that recapitulate the entire disease in 30 days and using that to do drug discovery. We're doing clinical trials, so the whole gamut. So most of my work now is on Alzheimer's. And then the other hat I wear is, how do we promote and preserve brain health before you even get to the point of disease?
Yeah. So with all that you've already done, what made you decide to team up with Lifeforce?
Well, I met Peter Diamandis. I've always known of Tony Robbins' work, and we've met a few times in the past. And Peter had me speak at some of his Abundance 360 events, the longevity event, and then at the main meeting in LA not so long ago. And came to really respect Peter as a true scholar and just a very smart guy. And I said, I'm happy to give talks at your events, and was always amazed at how Peter was able to just distill all the information from the day afterwards at the dinners for the attendees. And of course, Peter also created the X Prize. So So I had just immense respect for him. So when he told me what he was doing with Lifeforce, at first I'll admit I was skeptical, because there are so many, companies out there that say, send us your blood and we're going to do some new fangled diagnostic. And then no matter what the result is, they try to sell you the supplement and who knows what's in it. So I've seen too much of that, and I was skeptical. But then when I saw what Lifeforce was doing in terms of the diagnostics they were doing, which were very sound, medically sound, and then when I saw the types of supplements they were suggesting, even though we lack the clinical evidence on most of these supplements, we still need the clinical trials before we can say anything definitively. To me, if a supplement is safe and it's been known to work well in lab models, then I personally will take a chance on it and take it, and then just hope that over time, that the clinical trials showing true efficacy will be done. And of course, those trials are just as expensive as drug trials, and pharma companies aren't going to test, a supplement you can buy online, right? So, a lot of what I do now is I'm raising money to do clinical trials on supplements that otherwise won't be tested. So someday I can say about supplement A, B, or C, here's the clinical evidence that it works. For now, you just have to take the best shots on goal, the ones where lab models say that it looks beneficial and where they're safe. And I just think that Lifeforce has done that as well as you possibly can do today. So I thought it would be nice to get involved.
Well, that's great to hear. We are very much on the same page with what we want to accomplish here at Lifeforce. You mentioned using the biomarkers that are really sound medicine to be looking at for people. What are some specific biomarkers that you think are really critical that people are checking, especially as they're getting towards middle age?
Well, I think you have to do, a lot of the same biomarkers that you would look at if you're in a hospital, looking at your just various metabolics, and looking at glucose and insulin and indicators of organ function, looking at your lipids and cholesterol. You don't have to do anything magical. What I like about Lifeforce actually is that they're not trying to come up with some newfangled biomarker that no one's ever heard of and say, we got something special to look at in you. They're doing what you would do in the hospital, looking at standard metabolic profiles. And then based on that, trying to match that to the types of available natural products and supplements, which are deemed to be safe, which you could take to preserve your health, and promote your health. They're not really treating disease, right? The idea is to just be more proactive about your numbers beyond cholesterol. And if there's a natural product out there or something you can take that might help, then they'll suggest that. So I think in like I said, at some point you do have to look for the clinical data that backs all this up. But in the meantime, a lot of people don't have time to wait for that, and they need the help. And so I think the Lifeforce approach is among companies like this that I've looked at is the most sound, medically sound.
And we are hearing a lot of people starting to report more symptoms even earlier in life, in their 30s and 40s, things that people weren't experiencing, until more midlife, 50s, 60s. One of those big things is being not as mentally sharp as they used to be, or not able to perform, or having a lot of brain fog, even younger in their life. What's actually happening there neurologically when people are starting to experience that as they're aging?
Well, I think this gets back to also the question of which, biomarkers should we be looking at. And so let me finish on that question, and then I think, and get to that. So Lifeforce looks at things like thyroid stimulating hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, testosterone. It's very, a lot of people don't look at this, and it's very important, because you can have a memory problem due to a thyroid problem and not even know it. You might be stressing out, you have Alzheimer's, and all you got to do is take a, supplement your thyroid. A lot of these hormones are also affecting brain health. And in your brain, you want to keep inflammation down. Inflammation is the main killer. So if you look at the other biomarkers that are being homocysteine, vitamin D, just your A1C, like I said, cholesterol, all of these things are going to affect brain health, either through the neurovascular connection, in other words, a healthy heart, healthy brain, or through the connection of just, are you trying to control inflammation? So as we get older, after 40 or 50 years old, we start to accumulate protein debris in the brain. But in Alzheimer's, it's called amyloid. If you're pre-Parkinson, 30 years before Parkinson's disease, you might be accumulating something called Lewy bodies. There's a whole set of biomarkers that involve looking for that early proteinaceous debris that we use to say, is somebody 10, 20, 30 years away from risk for Alzheimer's? But all this proteinaceous debris doesn't cause the disease directly. It's kind of like COVID virus doesn't kill you. COVID virus causes inflammation in your blood vessels, in your lungs. And when it causes it in the blood vessels around the brain, that causes inflammation, and that causes the brain fog. You have to get inflammation in order to get the symptoms. You have to get inflammation in order for nerve cells in the brain to start dying, or the synapses, the connections between nerve cells, to start being pruned and removed. So I think what's smart about how Lifeforce is doing it is there's a big focus on the diagnostics that tell you about systemic inflammation in the body, inflammation in the brain, and a lot of the supplements that are being used to address that as well. Again, I always give the caveat that we need clinical trials in the future to really nail down the empirical evidence. But, I've always attested to the fact that, especially with family and friends, if I'm taking X number of things in the morning to control inflammation in my body and brain, I'll share it with family and friends with the disclaimer that we still have to do the clinical trials before we can say anything, with certainty about their effects.
Do you see benefit in repeating the lab work while on these treatments so that you can kind of change and alter what you're using based on what you're finding to be effective for somebody?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, we have a whole program starting now at Mass General in the McCance Center for brain health that I co-direct, where we're doing clinical trials on supplements and natural products, many of which are used in Lifeforce products, that we identified in what we call Alzheimer's in a dish. So we take stem cells from humans and turn them into different brain cells, neurons, glia, et cetera. We grow them in a gel-like matrix that creates a mini brain organoid the size of a paper punch. And we can recapitulate the whole process of Alzheimer's, from amyloid plaques and tangles and that protein debris I mentioned, onto inflammation, which takes 30 years in a person. We do it in 30 days in a dish.
Wow.
And this is, in fact, you mentioned that Time magazine, Time 100 thing. The reason why I got on there was that was the year we created Alzheimer's in a dish, because for the first time we could really recapitulate the disease using human cells in a mini brain, and it promised to make drug discovery and discovery of natural products that work 10 times faster, 10 times cheaper. Well, it actually turned out to be 100 times faster, 100 times cheaper. So we came up with over 100 different approved drugs and natural products that worked in our mini Alzheimer's in a dish model, hitting different pathologies, the ones that occur 30 years before, 20, 10 years before, or the inflammation that really is attacking the patient. And so because of that, we can take those products and we can do trials now where, instead of trying to spend years seeing if somebody's getting cognitively better, which is very difficult to see. And that's the type of trial that costs $1 billion, and you need thousands of patients. But if you use biomarkers, you can give them the supplements or the drug, the approved drug that you're repurposing, and then just track the biomarker and say, are these biomarkers suggesting that I'm reducing inflammation, I'm reducing pathology, they're going in the right direction? It's going to then de-risk that particular natural product. So when you go to a pharma company and say, hey, look what we found, they're more likely to want to embrace it in some proprietary way because you've shown that it's hitting the pathology, then they would do the very expensive trials to say, are we improving cognition? Are we improving mental performance? That's much more expensive. So tracking biomarkers while taking natural products or supplements or even safe repurposed approved drugs is actually the way the trials are going now. And that's what we're doing.
That's great. Yeah, that's something that we definitely advocate for our members. You mentioned that you're really studying a lot of these supplements or other medications, and that some of them are used in the Lifeforce products. I've heard you talk about quercetin before, as well as omegas. Is there anything that you'd like to share about what you kind of know about those and how they impact brain health?
Well, omega-3s, are very important. A colleague of mine, Gene Bowman, just did a fantastic trial on omega-3s. I think it was in collaboration with Nestle. He used to be at Nestle, and now he's joining us as our clinical trials director. Showing omega-3s is very effectively reduce inflammation in the body and brain. They also have a profound effect on some of the Alzheimer's pathology that involves these misfolded proteins like tangles and plaques. So I, on my own list that I suggest to friends and family and local football teams, omega-3s are right at the top. You also mentioned quercetin. So quercetin is a flavonoid, like fisetin. Fisetin is high in strawberries, for example. These flavonoids, these things that give fruits color, right? Antioxidants, so they help with the oxidative damage caused by free radicals. Inflammation kills, at least partially kills, by producing free radicals, causing oxidative damage to tissue and organs. So antioxidants like quercetin, fisetin are very useful. But we also found that these same types of class of flavonoids, they're also called terpenes, also have effects on clearing the proteinaceous debris in the brain, the plaque and tangle, that will lead over decades to Alzheimer's by eventually causing inflammation. So they're good for that purpose. And finally, quercetin is also known as a senolytic. And that means that, as we know, in the body and brain, certain cells just conk out, right? They become senescent. They're no longer useful. In fact, they're in the way. It's better to not have them. So there's a whole set of drugs and supplements out there that are used now to kill the useless senescent cells and get them out of the way, especially in some cases because they can become cancerous. Or in the brain, a senescent nerve cell is more likely to create that toxic protein debris that can lead to Alzheimer's or Parkinson later on. So that's another benefit of the quercetin.
So there's supplements, obviously, that can potentially help. The other thing I've heard you speak about, and you spoke about in one of your books as well, is SHIELD, is your acronym for kind of the way to live life to help reduce inflammation in the brain and help brain performance. Could you tell people about what SHIELD is?
Yeah, so when I wrote this trilogy with Deepak Chopra, starting with Super Brain, Super Genes, and the last one was supposed to be called Super Immunity, but the name was already taken by another book that did well, so we called it The Healing Self. And I remember when the book tour was going to start, I was thinking about some way to encapsulate the second half of the book, which is the action plan. What can you do every day to reduce inflammation in your body, reduce inflammation in your brain? Because, in all these diseases, heart disease, diabetes, any common age-related disease, they all have different ways to get you to inflammation. And inflammation is what really takes you out, especially in neurodegenerative diseases of the brain, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS. So when I went through the list of what we said to do, I tried to come up with an acronym. And I actually was doing this in the shower. And I have this pad in the shower called Aqua Notes.
Yeah.
And you can write on this pad when it's wet. And their little tagline is, "Don't let those good ideas go down the drain." And so I came up with, I said, okay, sleep and the diet and let's see, meditation practice and blah, blah, blah. And I came up with SHIELD, which is sleep. It handles stress. That's for the whole, stress leading to inflammation, meditation. Eye interaction, because loneliness is a risk factor for Alzheimer's as you get older. Not being alone. If you're alone and you like it, it's fine. It's if you're alone and you're stressed out about it. And then E is exercise. Exercise does everything from inducing the birth of new nerve cells in the part of the brain that's most vulnerable in Alzheimer's, the hippocampus, short-term memory. Exercise helps get rid of that proteinaceous debris. Exercise helps reduce inflammation. And L stood for learning new things, because as you get older, your brain goes down. The way your brain goes downhill is you lose synapses, the connections between nerve cells. So you have 100 billion nerve cells. You have hundreds of trillions of connections or synapses that makes up your neural network. And basically, what causes Alzheimer's in the learning memory area, or Parkinson in the movement area of the brain, is synapses get lost. So for Alzheimer's, the more synapses you make, it's like money in the bank. It's the more you can lose before you lose it. So you want to build up your synaptic reserve. So I tell people, when you're going to retire, don't just think about financial reserve, build up that synaptic reserve. So as you naturally lose synapses with age, you have more to back it up. The way you do that is learn new things, right? So right now, folks who are watching us, we're helping them by learning new things. And if we're boring them, we're putting them to sleep, we're also helping them. So it doesn't matter. And then D is diet. And diet, Mediterranean diet, #1 diet on the planet for brain health. Fruits, nuts, vegetables, seeds, whole grains, less or no red meat. I've been vegetarian myself since college. And the thing about the plant-based diet, like Mediterranean is heavily a plant-based diet, is it feeds those bacteria in your gut microbiome. And what we've learned is the gut microbiome is essential for keeping your brain healthy. So the healthier your gut microbiome is, the healthier your brain is. And that's not like woo-woo science anymore. There's hardcore evidence about the metabolites that are made by bacteria in your gut. 5,000 to 8,000 different species, trillions of bacteria, right? And they're making metabolites that get into your brain and keep your brain healthy. And we're studying these like crazy in Alzheimer's disease. And I started a whole company with Gary Ruvkin, he's the guy who discovered microRNA. I wrote about him in Super Genes. He'll get the Nobel Prize at some point for that. But we started a company to actually catalog all these strains of bacteria in your gut to see which ones are most useful. And then, as we like to say, use bugs as drugs. Actually make custom probiotics with bacteria you never heard of, not the ones on your yogurt label. Those are also gut bacteria, like Bifida and Lactobacillus, but bacteria that are more arcane, that you could put into a very fancy probiotic to actually treat a disease like Alzheimer's or ALS. So keeping those gut bacteria healthy and happy and balanced is important. I think probiotics are good, yogurt or a probiotic, but think about it. You got 1 trillion bacteria in there, 5,000 to 8,000 different species. On your yogurt label, there's 8 to 10 different species of bacteria, or on your probiotic, and maybe you're getting maybe 500 million or 1 billion bacteria, when there's already 1 trillion in there. It's much more important to give them what we call a prebiotic. That's plant fiber, because when they can eat well with plant fiber, it's like feeding your fish in the aquarium, right? What'd you rather do? Keep 50 fish alive in the aquarium with fish food, or once in a while add 1 or 2 more fish as the others die, right? So it's fine to have a probiotic, especially if you have a good one, but plant-based fiber is the best thing you can do for your gut, and that's the best thing you can do for your brain. And that's SHIELD.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And it's so easy and straightforward to recognize how to implement that in your life, I think, for a lot of people. Now, when they think about that, though, is this something that people should be thinking about implementing changes today to think about their brain health? Should they be thinking about it when they're not into their 40s or 50s or 60s? Is there any time that's the ideal age to start thinking about, your own health span?
Well, we call it SHIELD, right? I should have mentioned it's during sleep, by the way, that you get rid of that protein debris I talked about, the amyloid. And so you actually, every time you have a dream, sleep or REM into deep sleep, it's like a rinse cycle for the brain. You get rid of that proteinaceous debris. So 7 to 8 hours per day. And if you only get 5 or 6 hours, a good power nap where you have some dreaming and then a deep sleep, drool a little bit on your desk, that also will count as a rinse cycle. In the handle stress part, we've shown that meditation leads to rapid changes in your gene expression, your gene activity that are beneficial for the brain as well. So all kinds of good things from meditation. So handling stress includes, being more mindful, being in the moment. Now, when should you start doing this? Shield actually, as seems to refer to just preventing disease, right? Shielding your brain. But it also does something else. If you're younger, it actually promotes your mental agility. So it actually serves to preserve brain health, promote brain health. So if you practice shield when you're younger and your brain is most, vivacious, you can become, like a mental Olympian. So the same way you might, lift weights and run and work out for your body, if you want to do the equivalent of that for your brain to make you, as mentally fit as possible, shield also works. So I consult, for example, with teams like the New England Patriots I'm like the team neuroscientist, on brain health. Only Bill Belichick would have a team neuroscientist. And, and so, we talk about this with the players, about the importance of sleep and shield, about, the importance of diet. Because these guys, football players, boxers, they're getting banged in the head every day. And all those bangs to the head are causing inflammation every day. So every day it's important for them to clean that slate, get that inflammation out. So shield will also do that. And when you remove inflammation, remember, inflammation, going back to your earlier question, is the basis of brain fog. Mm-hmm. You get enough bangs to the head, you're going to feel like you have COVID. You're going to have brain fog. And then when you go play on the field, you're going to be less with it, right? You're going to not be as focused, not going to be as aware of what's going on. So you're more likely to get blindsided or hurt. So, having shield also by keeping inflammation down keeps brain function up and mental vitality up as well. So that could be at any age, young or old.
Do you recommend anybody that has a history of Alzheimer's or other neurodegenerative diseases in their family take special care at a certain point in their life?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people, if you have a first-degree relative with Alzheimer's, look at the age of onset, subtract 20 or 30 years from that, and that's when you need to think about the fact that your risk for the disease is higher because of your family history, and the disease pathology is beginning in you 20 or 30 years before your first-degree relative's earliest stage of onset. So if you have a sibling or mom or dad got the disease at, an early age, like 65, that if you inherited similar genetics, you can beat it with lifestyle. I mean, there's I found the first 3 Alzheimer's genes that were the low-hanging fruit back, when I was a student and training. The first 3 genes had mutations that guaranteed the disease. Lifestyle doesn't matter. Luckily, I have a drug I've been developing for 20 years that will reverse that death sentence, those mutations that guarantee the disease. I have a drug that's going into clinical trials this fall that took 20 years to get to, that should, if it's safe, reverse what those death sentence mutations do to guarantee the disease by 40 or 50 years old. The vast majority of genetics, 98 or 99% of Alzheimer's disease genetics, is actionable by lifestyle. So if you have a family history, just remember that 20 or 30 years before that age of onset, you might be beginning pathology. And now shield is not an option for you. It's an obligation if you want to preserve your brain. And luckily, most Alzheimer's disease is preventable with the right lifestyle, despite your genetics. Only 1 or 2% of the genetics guarantees it. And hopefully my drug will change that as well.
Wow, that's huge for people to really understand and internalize that so much of this is within your control to help with your own lifestyle. around Shield, because I know the questions that we'll get when people hear about this, especially around exercise and learning. Is there anything that we found, specific types of exercise or amounts of exercise that are needed, or should the focus just be on movement and less sedentary?
Yeah, so the important thing about exercise, there's two things important about exercise for the brain, minimally. One is that with movement, it's all about blood flow. Okay, so you want to get your blood flowing. That could be a brisk walk. I have a recumbent bike here next to me that I get on for, maybe 90 RPM at mid resistance for a half hour, then take a walk later on. During the day, for at least an hour during the day, you just want to get your blood flowing, get your heart rate up, not aerobic necessarily, but just with blood flow. So you might ask, what's so good about blood flow? That's the second part of it. When you're working out, your muscles produce this little protein called irisin, irisin. It's called it's a myokine. Myo for muscle, kine is what we use to say a chemical produced in the body. Irisin gets into the brain, and actually we've shown gets rid of the protein debris, the amyloid, that fights inflammation, and it promotes cognitive function and synapse function in neurons. It's kind of a miracle little protein, and it's made when you exercise, and then by getting your blood flow up, that helps deliver it to the brain. More blood flow is how you deliver good things made in the body and by muscle, by liver. We know that there's another protein made by the liver when you exercise that gets into the brain and actually helps the new nerve cells to be born in the short-term memory area that's most vulnerable to Alzheimer's. And it also helps induce certain growth factors to keep those nerve cells healthy. So that's the thing about exercise, is that it allows your peripheral organs and muscles to make good things for the brain. Then the blood flow increase gets them into the brain. And so you want to just get your blood, in terms of the recommendation, as long as your heart rate's up a little bit, taking a brisk walk or just on a bike or a jog, for at least an hour a day, you're delivering goodies to your brain. That's how to think about it. Doesn't have to be hardcore exercise.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that explanation, because understanding the why helps people to recognize it's not so much what you do, but it's that you do it, that's the benefit. And then for learning, sorry, go ahead.
No, learning new things. I was going to, So it's not about brain games, right? Mm-hmm. Brain games teach you how to focus. That's good because that helps you to learn if you can focus, right? But learning new things means, it means like this, watching this video. It could be reading a nonfiction book about history and learning something new about the Civil War. It can be watching a documentary on TV. As long as you're learning some new facts, or it could be learning a new hobby, learning how to play an instrument, learning a new language, taking up a new hobby like gardening or something. Anytime you're doing something new, there's also something called neurobics, right? Where you do things that deliberately challenge your brain, like brush your teeth with the opposite hand. Mm-hmm. Or when you're commuting to work, Monday through Friday, try to take a different route to work every day or a different way to get to work. Just make something new. Because every time you learn something new, you make synapses, and all learning is based on association, right? So whenever you learn something new, the new things associated with what you already knew. So the neural network and the synapses you already have are now going to be connected to new synapses for the new thing. So not only do you make new synapses, but you strengthen the ones you already had. So you're strengthening your neural network. And that provides resilience against age-related, cognitive impairment, including Alzheimer's disease. So when we talk about resilience, one form of resilience is reducing inflammation, because that inflammation actually kills the synapses. The other form of resilience is making more synapses so you have more to lose before you get into trouble.
That's really fascinating and not something I've heard people talk about before of building up the synapses. We tell women to build up their bone density before they hit menopause. We need to be talking about people's brains as well.
Yeah, you got to work out your brain. I mean, that's what this is all about. It's, people should realize mental health is physical. That's the paradox. Mental health is physical. Your brain is a physical organ. And with age, there's wear and tear, just like your knees start to go if you play, like me, too much basketball in your life, right? Your brain also inflammation also starts to take out nerve cells and synapses in your brain. So you have to do two things: reduce the attack of the inflammation with SHIELD, and also with SHIELD, the yellow part, learn new things and build up your resilience by making more synapses so you have more to lose before you lose it. It's that simple.
Well, this has been really, really fascinating. So enjoyable to get to talk to you, Dr. Tanzi. Where can people find out about you? Is there anything that you're working on currently that you'd like people to know about?
Yeah, I don't know the rest of it, but the McCance Center for Brain Health that I co-direct there's a lot of information on the website and the McCance Twitter site and LinkedIn and all that. We're constantly putting out every day new information about brain health there. I don't want to promote my books, but the last book I wrote, The Healing Self, a lot of the basis for SHIELD was in The Healing Self that came out a few years ago. Oh, I should also say for Alzheimer's, I work with a foundation called the Cure Alzheimer's Fund. And we raise about 25 to 30 million per year and only fund the highest impact research. And the cool thing about Cure Alzheimer's Fund, which is curealz.org, I know their website because I've been with them a long time. Every dollar in that they get is a dollar out. The board members cover all the overhead. So if you donate a dollar goes out. Very different than other foundations. And they're supporting about 80 researchers around the world that are really the A-list of Alzheimer's researchers. And their website always has the newest state-of-the-art news about what's going on in Alzheimer's disease.
Fantastic. Well, Dr. Tanzi, thank you so much. And thank you for doing the work that you're doing. It's such important work and really appreciate your time and insight today.
Well, thank you for having me. And I've enjoyed the conversation. And I hope your viewers this will help their brain health and mental vitality.
Yes, they got to learn something new today. So thank you for that. And so did I. All right. Thank you, Dr. Tanzi.
Thank you.